This episode is brought to you by Strength Portal. You need a single software platform that enables your trainers to deliver consistent, high-quality workouts, track client progress, and scale your business. The problem is you're still using pen and paper or basic spreadsheets to run your business, which leads to poor client experiences, inaccurate tracking, and prevents you from growing your business, making you feel frustrated. Strength Portal understand your challenge and have worked closely with the HIT industry to create a software platform to manage and scale your niche business. You can integrate with MindBody, manage a standardized exercise and workout library for your team, track workouts effectively, and produce client reports at the click of a button. Strength Portal is used by multiple businesses in the high-intensity strength training community, namely Discover Strength, Smart Strength Austin, Medix Precision Fitness, and more. Starting with Strength Portal is super simple. Number 1, sign up for the best package for your business. Number 2, let Strength Portal take the load off and help onboard your business onto the platform. And number 3, start delivering consistent workout experiences and scale your business to the next level. To help support the podcast, please go to strengthportal.com/high intensity business and sign up now so you can stop feeling frustrated about your business and start to scale your business to its true potential. Go to strengthportal.com/high intensity business. Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to High Intensity Business, the podcast where we discuss high intensity strength training and provide you with the tools, the tactics, and the strategies to grow your strength training business. This is episode 381, and today we're going to be exploring evidence-based diet recommendations for clients and this concept of satiety per calorie that I've heard Ted talk about. That sounds really interesting. Today's guest is Dr. Ted Naiman. Dr. Ted Naiman, as well as being one of the most popular guests on my podcast of all time, is a board-certified family medicine physician in the Department of Primary Care at a leading major medical center in Seattle. His personal research and medical practice are focused on the practical implementation of diet and exercise for health optimization. He's the author of the PE Diet. Ted, great to see you again.
Lawrence, man, it's great to see you too. It's been a couple of years, so it's so great to see you again.
Yeah, and we've done a fair few podcasts together actually over the years, but I'm really pleased to have you back because I always enjoy our conversations. I wanted to just kind of preface this conversation with this point, which is as a business. Well, let's start here actually. So we run a strength training studio here in Galway in Ireland. Lots of listeners of this podcast run strength training studios all around the world, right? And so they're focused on delivering strength training, personal training services to clients. Some of those do nutrition, some of those don't. I have a fairly strong opinion that as a business, we want to be focused on doing one thing well. I sometimes think it's a mistake to do too much as a fitness business because there's this homogeneity in fitness where we all just look the same if we all end up doing strength training, cardio, nutrition, mindset, etc. However, we all get asked all the time about nutrition because, as you know, it's a critical part of optimizing health and body composition. And so we need to address it in some way. And so I believe the best way to probably address that is with education, but we don't necessarily have to sell it as a service, right? I say this is my idea. This is mostly influenced by my conversations with experts on this podcast about the business side of this. So anyway, with all of that said, we're not looking to sell nutrition services or coaching services around that, but I do want to get better at educating clients on evidence-based approaches that are achievable in terms of improving their diet and their results and their body composition and their health. So what I'm hoping to get at this with you is to really think about what are when you're first working with a client, we have something called a teaching focus where we spend 20 seconds educating them on something about why strength training is important. But we could do the same for nutrition, right? So what are those bite-sized things that are really going to resonate with people, help them get good results, but also help them develop good habits? So starting there, what do you think are the most important evidence-based dietary recommendations we should be educating our clients about from the get-go?
Well, first of all, I love what you just said because, exercise is going to get everybody about halfway to the body composition that they really want. And, everyone's looking for more muscle and less fat. And that's pretty much the holy grail. And exercise is critical, but it's going to get you, maybe halfway there. So you have to have the diet and exercise together. And so like you said, you really want to make it as simple as possible because you don't have a lot of time to educate people about diet. And so for me, I've been slowly evolving over time to this sort of concept of satiety per calorie, which is basically everybody eats until they're not hungry. And yet you've got some people eating way more calories in that process than others. And it turns out that there are several, there's just a small number of evidence-based things that have been demonstrated to allow people to eat fewer calories as they're eating to satiety. In other words, improving satiety per calorie. And there are several things that are evidence-based for this. And the biggest rock in the jar is probably protein percentage. And the second biggest one is energy density of food. And there are some other factors we can talk about, but you can kind of multiply protein percentage by energy density and get about 80% of the story. And in fact, if you go to satietypercalorie.com, you can kind of see a visual guide, a visual calculator I have there with protein percent on the y-axis and energy density on the x-axis. And you can immediately see, people can just get this instant snapshot of how, oh yeah, I will basically feel fuller and eat less calories if I'm eating these super high protein, super low energy density foods versus donuts or something that's very low protein and high energy.
When you give advice like that to your clients as a doctor, right? How often do they follow that? And do you give them anything else? Maybe actual meal plans? Maybe you give them examples of what that looks like. How does that manifest in terms of foods on a plate? Like, do you give them anything else? And how does that kind of, do they follow through? Right.
So I found that you have to be super specific. Like I have to tell people, this is what it would actually look like. You would actually go to the store and look at all the yogurts on the aisle and find the one with the highest protein and the lowest carbs and fats simultaneously. And you'd actually buy that, take it home and eat it every time you were hungry. And so the more specific I get and have very concrete examples, the better. So I'm just nonstop in exam room with patients, pretty much just Googling food items that are instant wins and pulling them up for people and showing them the nutrition labels and showing them how they rank on protein percent and energy density and how you can even kind of just start glancing at labels and get a gestalt for, oh, this product's better than this one because it has slightly higher fiber and slightly higher protein and slightly lower carbs or fats and all these evidence-based directionals that will allow you to feel full and eat less calories at the same time. And so, yeah, I have to get really specific and I have to get really detailed and I have to pull up very specific examples that this person's going to be able to find in the store and say, this is the kind of thing you should be doing. So yeah, I found the more specific I can get, the better the results. So if I just tell somebody, oh, you should eat healthier, or why don't you eat less and move more, or something like that. The more vague it is, the more paralysis people have. They're not going to do anything. You have to literally tell them, this is what you buy and this is what you take home and this is what you cook and this is what you eat. And the more specific I can get, the better the results. And it also helps if I take, a minute or two to find out what people like or how much time they have to cook. And then, okay, now we can talk about, here's how you look at the fast food menu to see what's going to be the best in this with these parameters. Or these are the, ready to go foods you're just going to find in your grocery aisle, that you don't have to cook if somebody's not cooking. So if I find out where people are at, pull up some really specific examples, write some stuff down, then I find that people are, a lot more likely to try it out.
And so can we think about some examples for that? So, okay, no, I love the idea that you're asking a question, what kind of foods do you like? How busy are you? Do you enjoy cooking? So you're getting a gauge on, I guess also if they're a vegetarian or not is helpful too. But you're getting a gauge on what foods might be the best fit for them. So what might that look like if someone says, I've got no time? So I'm thinking about our target market, busy professional typically, who really values their time, hence why high intensity training is so appealing. I'm really busy. I'm omnivorous, right? I eat anything. Let's see here. And I don't really have time to cook. What would be your go-to Google option for them? What does an average meal look like specifically? Yeah.
Right. So yeah, and like you said, you find out what people prefer, what their eating pattern is, how much time they have, how much cooking they're doing, and then you start asking them very specific food recall stuff. Like you're like, okay, what is your number one go-to snack? And they'll be like, well, nuts because it's paleo. And you're like, oh, okay, well, let's pull this up. These nuts have like 10% protein and 6 kilocalories per gram, like this huge energy density and very low protein. And you're just going to automatically overeat. And hey, this is why you can eat that entire 1 pound bag of macadamia nuts that, by the way, was 3,000 calories. And, you're still kind of hungry afterwards. And so that, it's like, okay, this would be a much better snack. What about, dry roasted edamame, which has absurdly high protein. It's 40% protein, a huge amount of fiber. You literally can't eat more than one handful and you're full for the rest of your life. And if people try that, they know what I'm talking about. But it's like, okay, how about you take your go-to snack of nuts, replace them with this dry roasted edamame? Or it's like, okay, you like to eat yogurt. Are you looking at the macros on the back of that thing? You know what I mean? You look for the yogurt where you can take the protein grams and multiply them by 10. And if that's equal to or higher than the calories, then you've got a 40% protein item that you basically can't overeat. You will get thinner the whole time you're eating it. So if your Oikos 000 has 15 grams of protein and it's 150 calories, it's a 40% protein food, and it's awesome, versus like your sugary Yoplait or something that has 6 grams of protein and 200 calories or something like that. So it's you find out what foods people are eating, and then here's a slightly different version of that. You know what I mean? So I'm always like asking people, okay, what do you have for breakfast every day? And they're like, oh, well, I have cereal and milk. And I'm like, how about this protein cereal, which you can buy everywhere now, which, is amazing.
And Magic
how about
Spoon
this,
or one of those or whatever?
Well, like in this country, we have all these, premier protein products that they have, like a cereal that is, has mostly soy protein in it, but is extremely good macronutrients. And it's like better than pretty much any other cereal you can get. And then, it's like, how about this ultra filtered milk that you can get everywhere now too? That's, all the lactose is sucked out of it. It's fat free. It has a, absurdly high protein percentage. It's like 13 grams of protein per serving. And, you just start taking the things that people are going to already and then tweaking them a little. So I like to always just say, okay, tell me what you eat for dinner every day. And then, okay, how about these little tweaks? You know what I mean? You go from the super fatty beef to some sirloin, or you go from the just whole chicken with skin on to, maybe skinless chicken thighs or even chicken breast. And you're just doing these little substitutions of what people already eat for things that would be better. And so I definitely cheat by having people do a 24-hour food recall or just a typical meal recall. And then I just come back at them with some tweaks to that. You know what I'm saying?
But you have, how much time do you have per patient? Isn't it like 10 minutes or something like that in your practice?
Well, actually, now they recently restructured it so that I do actually have 25 minutes
My God.
per visit. I am supposed to shove a lot of stuff into that, including documentation and all these things. But I would say effectively, I have about 20 minutes to talk to people, which is that's pretty good. I mean, not that bad. It's not as bad as it used to be, like 10 minutes. Now it's 20. So that's like luxury. I'm just like, I have all the time in the world. We can talk about anything. What else do you want to talk about? I mean, it just feels like pretty good right now, honestly.
That's great. Good for you. So, okay. So I guess with that amount of time, you might actually be able to dig into a day's eating and give them examples. So that makes sense. I guess I'm just thinking of the time challenge that we might have. Now, I think it's important to have multiple touch points. So we have a teaching focus, which I mentioned, which is like 20 seconds or whatever before the actual workout, where we'll just touch on like something about strength training and soon more things about nutrition. But then we also have emails that go out once a week to educate people. Maybe education cards that we give out as well, which have like, just little, cards with lessons on they can take away. So all of this stuff can be incorporated here. I think it's ambitious to think that you can't just say everything you know about this topic and expect it to sink in and resonate. You've got to have a bite-sized approach and really meet them where they are. Kind of what you're saying. It's like, don't change their diet radically. Look at what they're eating already and find suitable replacements and substitutions that are going to be viable for them. And what kind of reaction do you get to that when you say, hey, this is your cereal currently, maybe you should try this cereal and this milk? Are they like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense, and they just more often not will just make the shift? Do you find, or what sort of reaction do you get to that?
Yeah, I think what ends up happening, it's kind of like exercise, where people are like, well, I tried exercise, I lifted weights for an hour and I didn't notice anything. I was no stronger. I had no more muscle. So why would I even do that? So I just stopped working out. It's the same thing with these diet substitutions. People are like, why would I eat this yogurt over this one? It's like hardly any different. It's the same calories. So like, who cares? What's the point? It's such a small shift, and you have to do that all day, every day, day after day for a year. And then you've lost 30 pounds of fat. You know what I'm saying? It's like such a slow, gradual thing that nobody's doing it because it just seems stupid and pointless. It's almost like exercise. I hate to say it. But once you like get someone to try that out and they're like, oh yeah, I actually did eat a whole lot less. I was actually way less hungry. I was actually not in my pantry at 10 o'clock at night, just sucking down the macadamia nuts like usual. I think it's talking people into making these little changes and then building it into your routine and then iterating and then making it sustainable. And then once you kind of get into that zone, it's pretty much on autopilot. But yeah, you have to sell people on it initially, because this seems like such a small thing that it's dumb. It's like, oh, I should eat on smaller plates, right? Sure, whatever, blah, blah, blah. People just think that's sort of stupid and they never bother.
It's cliche at this point.
Exactly. So it's one of these things where if you can talk people into actually doing that and then just making that part of who they are and what they do, like a habit, it's pretty powerful. It's tiny little things, really sustainable and really iterated, and it's consistency. It's just like exercise, to be honest.
Yeah, it's like another way of putting it is like just getting 1% better each day, right? I love that concept. I mean, I think about it for you and I, and like the journey you've been on with diet and exercise is just like that. You know, you were quite vulnerable and showed quite a lot of humility in previous podcasts with other people, describing how you got really down the rabbit hole with like paleo and all these other things, and you were like really low carb, and how you've evolved your perspective on this stuff over time as you've got more into the research and done more experiments. And I feel like a similar way. Like, you know, my diet has evolved massively over time. You know, I got really dogmatic about the whole carnivore thing. I thought that was the way. And now I would say my view on diet is completely aligned with yours at this point, based on the most recent podcast I've listened to you, where you describe things. And for those that are wondering what that is, you know, we'll talk about that a little bit today, but it's also good to just check out Ted's book called The PE Diet, which we'll link to from the show notes. But you know, I think about things now, right? So bringing it forward to now for me, just a very quick anecdote. I've got 2 kids now. We were joking about how long it's been. I've got a small family, and that's a huge game changer. And suddenly you have no time. The whole idea of optimizing anything just goes out the window, right? You can't listen to Tim Ferriss anymore, or anyone who doesn't have kids who has a podcast and talks about productivity is no longer relevant. You know, it's And you know, when I had my first kid and we were in COVID, I put on weight just like a lot of people did. I probably put on 20 pounds. And then over the last year or so, I've just shaved all of that off, maybe over the last year and a half, effortlessly. And that's just through implementing all the stuff that you and I know and I've learned from yourself, and just really focusing on eating the proteins and the foods that I enjoy that I know to be good. So I always front load the day with a lot of protein. And what I've noticed, Ted, and I'm curious what you think about this, my evening habits aren't great, right? So, but I'm working out twice a week. So I'm doing high intensity training. I'm working out pretty hard. I'm moving a lot. I'm walking the dog. I eat really well, probably like the first 2 meals of the day, high protein, steak and eggs, or some kind of meat and eggs and vegetables and stuff. But then when I come home after I pick my son up from daycare, my willpower is like bottomed out. And whatever the missus is putting on that table, it's going in my mouth, whatever, regardless of what it is. And quite often, almost on a daily basis, I will like have, refined, high glycemic index type food. And I seem to quote unquote get away with it. I'm pretty good shape. I'm lean, but it does affect sleep and energy. And I do feel it the next day. So I know it's not optimal from that perspective. There's no such thing as a free lunch here, right? I am maintaining good body composition, but I'm probably doing a little bit of damage to myself. Is that true? And what's your take on that?
No, I don't think that's true. Okay. I honestly think that if you're active and you're doing, let's say you're doing at least a half an hour of moderate to vigorous cardio a day, and you're, if your activity is high enough that you're burning at least, 1.5 your basal metabolic rate per day, so you're, burning some extra calories. I firmly believe that at least 10%, if not 20% of your diet could just be pure abject garbage, and you're going to have no problems disposing of those calories. And I no longer
don't think it has any impact on health span or longevity.
I really don't believe that. No. So I've really gone from thinking some foods were clean and some were dirty and some were good and some were evil and some were just inherently making you healthy and inherently making you sick. I just don't buy that anymore. Like, all of these are literally just broken down into the same 20 amino acids and the same fatty acids and the same simple sugars. Like, you basically have the same components. You're really just looking at a spectrum of satiety per calorie, where something that's very high in protein and fiber and very low energy density and very low carb and low fat at the same time, you're pretty much not going to overeat that, versus something that's just pure sugar and fat like ice cream. You're going to way overeat that because of the palatability and the hedonic factor and the energy density and the bliss point and all of these other reasons, but it's not inherently harmful by itself. It's literally going to be just broken down into the same glucose and, fatty acids that your steak and salad is. Just the quantities and the ratios are affecting, mostly the satiety hormone signaling in different ways. But as long as you have plenty of storage space for those incoming energy macronutrients, I'm not convinced it's going to do anything bad to you. And if you do some huge glycogen depleting workout and then just eat like donuts or ice cream, I literally don't think that's harmful or damaging. I don't buy into the seed oil terror that everyone has, that linoleic acid is, breaking your mitochondria or any this. There is really no signal to support this in the medical literature. So I don't feel that any of these foods are inherently, damaging or screwing up your health span or really doing much of anything in and of themselves. It's the energy toxicity setting that you see the real problems. You know what I mean? Like, if all of your fat cells are already full and all of your muscles are already full of intramuscular triglycerides and glycogen, and then you eat a whole bunch of extra calories on top of that have no place to go, you have huge problems with excess energies in the bloodstream that have no place to go. You have high triglycerides and high blood sugar, and your insulin's high all the time, and your body's trying to shove fat places it doesn't belong. And then you're going to get tons of inflammation because, these overfilled fat cells are highly inflammatory, and you're going to get all kinds of basically the whole spectrum of metabolic syndrome and all the chronic diseases that are associated with that, not necessarily from insulin itself, which is just a signpost that you're energy toxic, but really from the energy toxicity of eating more energy than you can store essentially, big picture. So as long as you're way below your personal fat threshold and you have tons of room to dispose of incoming energy, I think you can eat donuts and garbage. And I don't think that does anything bad to you. And I think someone who's active and exercising gets away with a lot more of that. If you're super sedentary, you can't get away with as much of that without problems. But yeah, no, I don't think you're doing anything bad to yourself. And also I have a lot of patients who are in the same boat as you. They're like, I have control over what I eat for breakfast and lunch, but then like dinners with the family. And honestly, as long as you're front loading a lot of protein and fiber and eating this very high satiety per calorie, high nutrient density, low energy density stuff earlier, you can probably get away with this meal of just whatever you want and eating a certain amount of just even empty calories, and you're going to be fine. So I have no problem with what you're doing. I think it's great. I don't think you're doing anything bad to yourself, as long as you're lean enough to be way under your personal fat threshold and not have any of these energy toxicities or insulin resistance.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a mystery to me, because I've been like, how come I've been able to stay so lean right now? Because I'm like, it hits 5 p.m. We're having dinner. Dinner's fine. Dinner's typically high protein still and low energy density, relatively low energy density. But then there's a pastry there. I'm rooting around for some kind of sugar hit, so I'm looking in the fridge and I'm taking the kids' yogurts, which aren't even for me, right, and eating those. It's that kind of thing. So yeah, I have. It makes total sense what you're saying, but I have been surprised that I've been able to retain a certain level of leanness throughout all of this, or at least in the last 6 months to a year or so. And yeah, I just didn't think that would be that possible, because there was a point where, you know what it is, Ted? And I'm sorry to get off topic, because I want to get back to obviously the educational focus for the clients, but this is helpful. The problem was that I was actually eating late. So, and maybe we can get into this a little bit in terms of circadian rhythm, but I would put the kids down and then I'd have dinner late. And isn't there some research from Sachin Panda, where he talks about actually eating, you could eat, healthy foods late versus a group that eats bad food when it's light and in line with their circadian rhythm, and the group that eats when it's light tends to do better. Is that correct? Have you looked into evidence around circadian rhythm and eating? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, there is evidence that people are a little bit more insulin sensitive in the morning, and that front loading your calories seems to possibly be slightly better than backloading them. However, in a lot of this research, they're not looking at exercise factors. So to be honest, I think that if you're doing if you do a heavy workout or something like that, or a glycogen depletion cardio or really intense resistance training, I honestly think you might get better partitioning backloading that, even if you're eating late at night. I think that might really overshadow the circadian part. And I also think that if you look at whole body insulin sensitivity in the morning being technically higher than later in the day, you're really looking at the level of the fat cell and not at the level of the muscles, which might be more insulin sensitive later in the day after you've depleted them from, walking your 10,000 steps, doing your half an hour cardio, doing your, resistance training. You actually see better insulin sensitivity at the muscle. In other words, all those calories you eat get sucked into your muscle pretty readily without very much insulin at all if the muscles are very depleted. So if I'm eating a ton of carbs after a major workout, the glucose just falls into your muscles down a concentration gradient with almost no insulin. It's you can dispose of a lot of carbohydrate with very little insulin at all. You're very insulin sensitive at the muscle level. So you might have better partitioning and better insulin sensitivity at the muscle at the end of the day, post-training with depleted muscles, than you would have if you just got up in the morning and said, I should eat everything now because that's what Sachin Panda says is the best for circadian reasons. It's really not looking at exercise at all. And so I think I have a major problem with just telling people, oh yeah, you should always eat all your calories as early in the day as possible. I don't think that's really, I don't think that's realistic, and I don't think that represents the exercise side of the coin. So yeah, I'm pushing back against that. And in the real world, what we see is that it doesn't matter. Whatever is the most convenient for you, or whenever you're able to eat the highest quality food or the highest satiety calorie, more specifically, that's going to work the best for you. So I honestly, I don't really care when people eat. I don't care if you eat, way later or way earlier. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think it's more important what you eat than when. And I personally backload most of my calories. I eating more later at night, honestly, than I am. I never eat before like noon. And so I'm definitely more backloading the calories.
Yeah, interesting. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I think, I'm not doing a controlled study on myself, and I don't count calories, I don't track, which would have been interesting to see, because I think I am eating less organically through eating more satiety per calorie, as you say. But I have been training more. And this is where I wanted to come on to next, is I think I've been downplaying the benefits of fat loss from strength training, because the general spiel is, hey, you know what? You're going to increase metabolism by whatever it is, 7 to 11% for a few days. You're going to retain lean muscle as you diet. You're going to, what else would I say around that? I can't even remember now, but I will always say to people, look, if they want to get really lean or they want to lose any weight, I'll usually say that that's going to be predominantly diet. And I don't think that's incorrect, but I do think maybe I played down the impact of strength training. So can you remind us, and if you think I'm correct, how and why strength training is so valuable from a fat loss perspective? Maybe I'm missing something there.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're missing anything, but I do think there's a bunch of reasons. First of all, just having more lean mass raises your basal metabolic rate, which is huge.
That's what I meant to say.
Massive. Yeah, I mean, that's like a huge factor. So if you look at all these people who lose a ton of weight, but half of it's muscle, the rebound is going to be 100%. You know what I mean? If I just stop eating, lose a ton of weight, 50% of its muscle, basically my basal metabolic rate has dropped so much, and my body wants to go back to the same energy flux. So I will literally just regain it all. And so you absolutely have to lose pure fat and retain as much muscle as possible. And that means resistance training. So the more muscle you have, better, the higher basal metabolic rate. And so that's one big reason, but also exercise of all forms, including resistance training and cardio, improves satiety signaling. So you're actually more in touch with hunger and fullness, and you're literally going to be fuller as a result of doing exercise. So it improves satiety signaling. It improves basal metabolic rate. The other thing is, so let's say your basal metabolic rate is here, and then the activity you're doing on top of that is a multiplier, right? So we describe people's total energy expenditure as a multiplier of their basal metabolic rate. So like if I'm just laying in a coma, my basal metabolic rate is 1,600 calories a day or something. But if I'm lightly active, maybe I hit 1.4 basal metabolic rate of my total daily energy expenditure, because the 1,600 is from being in a coma and the 0.4 is from walking around and just doing my white collar job or something, right? It's the lower your total daily energy expenditure is, the harder it is to not overeat, because your body wants this really high energy flux where you're, burning your total daily energy expenditure is 2 times your basal metabolic rate. So if you're sedentary and not burning many calories, it's very, very hard to match your intake to your expenditure. But studies show that as you increase your physical activity to the point where you're, if you can get up to about 1.7 times your basal metabolic rate for total daily energy expenditure, gets way, way easier to stay lean, because you're so much better at matching intake to expenditure. If you go above that, if you start doing what we call pulling calories, where let's say I'm training for a marathon, so now I'm exercising an extra hour a day, and my total daily energy expenditure is 2 times my basal metabolic rate. I start pulling calories. It means I'm eating more, but I'm just eating enough to match what I'm spending. And the matching of your intake and expenditure gets really, really tight and really, really good. And you basically just get thinner and thinner and thinner. So exercise is extremely powerful for just making people thinner because you're so much better at matching intake to expenditure. And most of that is via improved sensitivity to satiety signaling. And so there are all these reasons that exercise is awesome. It's like resistance training, preserves your lean mass and raises your basal metabolic rate, and it improves satiety signaling, and it improves your overall energy expenditure. So your intake matches your expenditure better. And there's probably a zillion other reasons that I don't even know about at this point. But yeah, it's critical. I used to think, diet was more important than exercise. Absolutely not. I think it's just completely 50-50. And honestly, if you flex the exercise higher, you can get away with lower quality diet. I mean, they say you can't outrun a bad diet, but to some extent you actually can. So exercise is absolutely critical.
I think that's interesting. I think I've made the mistake of saying that diet's like 90%, because immediately in someone's head, you're basically saying, they're thinking, well, strength training plays no role. This is going to play no role in my fat loss, which is definitely not true and not what you want them to think. So that's amazing, Ted. And I'm totally going to change how we communicate that. In terms of energy expenditure, I'm just curious, since you tend to be looking at the literature far more frequently than me on this stuff, do you know exactly how much one is increasing their energy expenditure when they do resistance exercise to a high level of effort? What one can expect? I mean, I read before it was sort of 7 to 11% or something like that. And I believe that's evidence-based, but have you got any view on that at all?
Yeah, it's less than 10%. I mean, okay. Typically if you do an hour of high intensity resistance training for an average size person, it's going to be, 300 or 400 calories. And that's going to be less, like you said, 5 to 8% ish of your total. So yeah, it's not as huge as cardio in terms of just energy expenditure, but it more than pays for itself based on the accrual of lean mass and the elevation of your basal metabolic rate the other 23 hours a day. So it's a little hard to quantify because it's better than it looks like on paper if you're just doing calorie math. But yeah, you're right. That's roughly accurate.
So you think cardio is more effective from that perspective in terms of the energy expenditure side of it, not the other variables?
Absolutely. Yes. You can just crank up your total daily energy expenditure a lot higher with just cardio. And honestly, that is why I do like cardio. I mean, I like resistance training more. If I had to just pick one, I would do resistance training, but I'd probably do it with shorter rest time so I could get a cardio effect as well and it cheat that way. But like, honestly, I do think you theoretically want to be doing some of both because it's easier to scale up the calorie burn with cardio. And it kind of depends on what someone's overall activity level is. If you're already walking 20,000 steps a day because you're a server, you don't really have to add any cardio to that. You just need to do your strength training. But for someone who basically just sits all day long, please do some kind of cardio, even if it's just like incline walking or something, because you're not going to burn quite as many calories as you want from just resistance training.
Now, just to touch on this briefly, do you think there's any magic to any particular zone, like heart rate zone, or do you think it's just a quantity intensity thing where, if it's really low intensity, it's just you got to get more volume of cardio. But if it's really high intensity, like high intensity interval training, then you get a brief amount. It doesn't really matter. It's whatever fits your lifestyle. Or do you think, no, actually you should try and do this much? You've got some people talking about the importance of zone 2 versus zone 4 and zone 5 and this kind of thing. How do you think about that?
I think it's completely identical to rep range for strength training. So, we know you can get hypertrophy from like 5 reps all the way up to 30 reps. And as long as you just take it to failure, you're going to get these benefits, right? But then we also know, okay, you get slightly different flavor to these benefits. You're a little more strength on the low side and a little more, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy on the high side, metabolic stress, and you're getting like higher tension low and higher metabolic stress high. And And you actually want to play that whole rep range when it comes to resistance training, right? So you get a little bit of the benefit. You don't want to do some low reps, some high rep, and kind of everything in between. Cardio is definitely the same way. You can always trade intensity for duration. So like you can do an hour of just walking or 15 minutes of running or a half an hour of a light jog, and you kind of get very similar benefits, similar calorie burn, similar benefits throughout that range. But you definitely want to do some of all of the rep range. You really want to do some very high intensity stuff because that's going to push your VO2 max up higher. But you also want to do some zone 2 because you get this really good mitochondrial fat burn effect going on. And so I honestly like people to play with the whole rep range, just like strength training.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I need to keep up my high intensity sea swimming front crawl game going, which I'm trying to form a habit around. It's not easy. Awesome. Thank you for that. So, okay. So let me just see here. I want to see if there's anything else. No, that was great just in terms of fat loss and strength training and general exercise was really helpful. Oh, just going back to what you were saying about, in the context of myself or individuals like me, getting away with like 10 or 20% of eating whatever. Are there exceptions to that? You've got people with autoimmune issues. There must be some exceptions or edge cases where individuals don't respond well to those foods. Because I just want to make sure, I don't want to just figure out here if you're using like a blanket statement or whether no, you're kind of generalizing here. And there might be some edge cases. Yeah.
There are edge cases for food sensitivities, of course. If you're celiac, you don't want to eat gluten. And if you're allergic to something, you might not want to eat it. And of course, only 7% of Americans are metabolically healthy right now. So you can literally, if you just say, oh, Naiman says I can eat 20% donuts, and you just eat your donuts right now, your blood sugar might be 200 for the next 3 hours, unbeknownst to you. And that's probably bad. So I'm talking about someone who's just completely healthy, completely already has good body composition, well below their personal fat threshold. They have low insulin, low triglycerides, low fasting glucose, a low hemoglobin A1C. They're, have plenty of muscle and exercising daily. That person can, I'm quite sure, eat at least 10%, not 20% of the diet is just completely empty calories because they have no problem disposing of them. And none of those calories are inherently bad or dangerous. Like if you just basically just ate, refined fat and refined carbs for 10 or 20% of your calories, but you're under your, but you're on a, maintenance level of calories and you have a good body composition. I'm not convinced that's going to harm anyone at all. So I really am trying to get away if labeling foods as good or bad or cheats or clean, and just put everything on this satiety per calorie spectrum where you have a really high satiety per calorie foods, and that's your fish and salad, and you've got low satiety food per calorie foods, and that's your donuts where it's mostly just sugar and oil. And I don't think it's inherently damaging in and of itself. It's just the pattern of it. If that's all you eat, you will end up eating too many calories, and eventually you'll have a lot of energy toxicity problems.
This episode is brought to you by Strength Portal. You need a software platform that enables you to track workouts, deliver consistent high-quality client experiences, and scale your business. The problem is you're still using pen and paper or basic spreadsheets to run your business, which leads to inconsistent workout experiences and stifles your business growth, making you feel frustrated. Strength Portal have worked closely with the HIT industry to create a software platform to manage and scale your niche business. Strength Portal is used by multiple businesses in the high-intensity strength training community, namely Discover Strength, Smart Strength Austin, MedX Precision Fitness, and more. To help support the podcast, go to strengthportal.com/high-intensity business and sign up for your ideal package now. That's strengthportal.com/high-intensity business. And now back to the episode. Understood. Thank you for that. So bringing it back to this idea of how do we effectively educate our clients on how they can improve their diet and lose fat. You touched on, I love the use of the rocks in the jar, right? So for anyone who is not familiar with that, That's the idea that when it comes to prioritization or choosing big impact, high impact activities, you have your jar. I think it's a famous professor or something used this, didn't he, in a class in some university somewhere, where he had a jar on the table and he demonstrated that, the rocks need to go in first. I'm butchering this, but he tried to shove all these rocks and pebbles and sand in this jar, and he couldn't get the rocks in, I believe. And the rocks, they symbolize most important activities or tasks or whatever. Whereas when you put the rocks in first, then the pebbles and the sand, you can fit everything in the jar. And the whole point is if you prioritize the most important activities or tasks, or in this case, dietary habits, everything else is going to kind of fall into place and you're going to have the most success. I think that's a fair summary. So I like the way you use that as the analogy for this, Ted. I think that was probably completely unnecessary, me saying that, but never mind. So you went straight to high protein energy density. So let's almost role play this, right? So I'm a client, you're the trainer. You've got 30 seconds to tell me something educational about fat loss that's going to help me on a diet side. Are you going to firstly talk about high protein? Is that the first thing you're going to go to? And how would you articulate that? Just curious how you would send that across. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be like, okay, protein's the most important. It's going to support your lean mass versus the non-protein macros are supporting your fat mass. And you want higher lean mass, lower fat mass. You want more protein, less non-protein energy, carb and fat. And it's also going to give you higher satiety per calorie. So I tell people to just, the simplest, easiest thing to do is just count your protein grams in the day. Look at everything you eat and just write down how many grams of protein were in it. And at the end of the day, you'll be like, oh, well, okay, I ate 60, 70, 80 grams of protein. And now the trick is get in 100 grams of protein before you eat, maybe even half your calories for the day or half the calories you usually eat. And people are like, well, how do I do that? And I'm like, you're going to have to find foods that have more protein and less non-protein energy, less fats and carbs. So let's talk about what those could be. And so just like looking at the protein and saying, oh, hey, what if I could get to 100 grams of protein before I ate, half my meals in the day, or like before I was done with all the energy I usually eat. And I think that is the very simplest, the very first step for most people is this protein awareness. Like, oh, well, crap, I ate this croissant. It has 1 gram of protein and 400 calories. That's not going to get me very far. So it's this, just count the protein. That's step one. And that's what I would do if I just. had 30 seconds with somebody.
Love that. Protein awareness is what I'm going to call that, which I just stole from you. So would you, in terms of metrics, what are you saying? Are you saying pound per gram of ideal body weight? Is there any other way you might put it across in terms of quantifying it for someone?
Right. Yeah. I think anyone who is working out and trying to optimize body composition and health, a super good rule of thumb is a gram per pound of ideal body weight. That's not like what you weigh. That's what you'd weigh if you were flawless. I'm like, what would you weigh if you had perfect body composition and you were like a bodybuilder on stage? What should your weight be for your height? What's your ideal body weight for your height? What would you weigh if you were ripped and jacked? And you use that weight and eat a gram per pound, or 2.2 grams per kilo or whatever. I'm stuck in America. I apologize. No, and I think that's a really good starting point. But, with this protein awareness piece and just being 1% better, it's also like, how about just a little higher than you were before, like a little more protein and a little higher protein percent. So you're not eating as many calories. And it's critical to get the percentage concept across, because I'm like, I don't want you to just eat more of the protein containing foods you're currently eating, because they're way too low in protein percentage and you're going to way overeat calories. So you need something with a higher protein percentage so you can eat a little more protein for less calories.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. And I will just say, you did a great podcast with Ben Paluski. I think I'm saying that name correctly, about 8 months ago, but still probably accurate in terms of your viewpoints on a lot of these things. Most of what you said today is paralleled that. So I just want to promote that, because I want if people want more information beyond what we talk about today, then that's also a really good source, because he goes quite high level on lots of different things around protein. One of the things being that there is really no limit to how much protein you can consume, because it's so self-limiting, right? You shouldn't be worried about that. And we know that all the stuff around protein causing kidney damage and stuff like that is been debunked, and there's pretty good evidence around that now, isn't there? So what's number 2? So you got high protein. Now you're thinking of, okay, you're seeing a client for the second time. You got that second teaching focus you can deliver. What's the next thing? Are we now talking about energy density, or are we talking about something else?
Yeah, I mean, next up would definitely be energy density. And it's like, okay, now look at how many calories are in your food per gram. It's like that tub of Greek yogurt. That's 1 calorie per gram, or maybe 0.9 calories per gram. And you can literally eat a pound of that, and it's 400 calories. I mean, it's just so low energy density. And I'm like, versus look at your high protein bar. Look at the Quest bar, the whatever bar you're eating that has protein. Okay, that's 200 calories and it's 50 grams. So that's 4 calories per gram. And that's why you eat one of those bars and you're still hungry, and you're like, I could literally eat 10 of these in a row, even though they're 40% protein. So it's like protein only gets you halfway there, right? Mm-hmm. And there are tons of societies on earth where people don't really eat a very high protein diet, but they're super lean and they're super healthy. It's like, you go to Japan and they're not eating more protein grams per day than we are, but obesity is 3%. It's like, wow. Well, what's the other part? What's the other secret? Because it can't just be protein. There's way too many black swans. We have way too many societies where protein percent's fairly low, but people are super lean and healthy. And the energy density is the other side of the coin. You can really get good body composition in terms of low fat if your energy density is low enough. And so that's the next thing I have people look at. I'm like, just look at the grams of the serving size and look at the calories. And you really want to be, 1 to 2 kcals per gram. And so your little protein bar is 4 kcals per gram, 5 kcals per gram. And your candy bar is like 7 kcals per gram. And that's why you're eating 1 billion calories and you're still kind of hungry, because the weight and volume of that food is so small and the calories are so high, you're just instantly screwed. That's the problem with your macadamia nuts. That's why nuts are not a good snack for most people, right? Sure, it's a healthy food. Sure, it's paleo, but it has absurd energy density. It's like peanut butter. It's a healthy food. It's natural. It's awesome. And it's, 7 calories per gram. You're just going to instantly overeat the calories. And so you eat the Greek yogurt, or you eat the salad or something like where you get this huge weight and volume of food for hardly any calories. And so that's step 2 for me. It's like the protein awareness is 1, and then the energy density is the second one. And that, incorporates other things as well, like being low carb and low fat at the same time. And both of them imply basically cutting out carbs and fats, honestly.
Now, why is it that it works better than if it's like a 1 to 2 ratio? Is it because there's higher nutrient density per calorie? Is it something like that?
Wait, I'll say that again.
So why is it that a 1 to 2 ratio works well versus a 1 to 7? Is it in terms of why does that make you more satisfied? Is it because of like nutrient density in the food, or what's causing that?
Oh, right. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So humans mostly eat until they get a certain weight and volume of food, because your brain has no clue like whether that's going to be enough food for you. So you're just used to eating a certain weight and volume of food. So humans eat 3 pounds of food a day, and so you're just going to eat 3 pounds of food almost irrespective of the calories in there. And so we have some amazing studies where they if you really, really tweak the energy density, you can feed people food that's the same 3 pounds weight and volume, and one meal will be 3,000 calories per day and the other will be 1,600 calories per day, and people will just keep eating those calorie levels. We have a study that was it's a couple decades old now, but they fed people like a double energy density and half energy density, and had people eat these foods all day for days, and you literally had almost double the calories in the high energy density people, but the satiety scores were the same. Everyone ate till satiety. They're just like, eat as much as you want how do you feel? Hunger scores, satiety scores. And then one group's eating 3,000 calories a day. The other group's eating 1,600 calories a day. It's a really dramatic. And if you look at some of the more recent Kevin Hall studies where, he had his low carb, animal-based diet versus a low-fat plant-based diet, and had this massive difference where they ate 750 calories per day less on the low-fat plant-based diet, but the real difference was a 2x energy density difference. That was the main factor. The protein percentages were basically the same. And so you're really just looking at this huge energy density driver there. And that's what's powering that. Basically, you're just going to eat the same weight and volume of food that you're used to eating. And so
it's a weight thing there, not a nutritional density thing as such.
Right. And it's a shorter term effect. So short-term satiation, like just terminating a meal, you eat until you get a certain weight and volume of food. But then the long-term satiety, like how long you wait till you eat another meal, is mostly determined by protein content of that meal. So I could just eat a whole head of lettuce and I'm super satiated temporarily. I stop eating, I'm done eating, but then I'll be hungry an hour later, or a couple hours later, versus if I ate half a head of lettuce and 2 chicken breasts, I'm not hungry for many hours. So it's this weird combination of weight and volume of food giving you shorter term satiation and a short term satiety, versus protein content giving you this longer, medium and longer term satiety. And you also throw fiber into the mix because it really slows digestion. And so you kind of add all these things together, and that makes you the most successful. But you can kind of get there with either protein percent or energy density. And the smart move is to look at both of them at the same time.
And yeah, and this list we're forming here, this is basically making up the premise that underpins satiety per calorie as being the focus, right? Because I know you have I think when you were talking to Ben, you had 9, but I don't know if you got through every single one, but it was something like 9 points. I think I took down 5. So, okay, you're coming on to the third visit, the third session, right? So just for everyone listening, you can take this information, you can put this into email, obviously handouts, teaching focuses, seminars, right? You can learn about the stuff yourself and deliver it in a seminar format. So what's the third thing? Is it fiber? Is it something else? What's the third on the list?
It's fiber. The third one, it would definitely be fiber. And so fiber should really have 0 calories per gram. They're different countries do it differently. I think in Canada and Mexico, they do actually give fiber 0 calories per gram. Here in the US, you're supposed to use 2 calories per gram. And we know soluble fiber does actually generate some calories, insoluble kind of doesn't. So most fibers should be somewhere in between, a 1 calorie per gram. But the satiety is so high, and the number of grams that people eat typically in a day is so low that we really shouldn't ascribe any calories to fiber, and definitely raises satiety per calorie. So I think fiber is probably the third thing. I would be hey, why don't you look at how many grams of fiber you're eating? And the average American's eating, 15 grams of fiber a day, I think. And you really want to be eating at least double that, and probably even higher. So that's another thing for, I think, people to focus on. That definitely.
And is there a thermogenic effect with fiber as well, or is that just protein?
There absolutely is. So that's the other
with
thing.
Any non-processed food, isn't it? Go on. Yeah. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. So how protein's really 3 kcals per gram because you're burning 25% of it in thermic effective food. Fiber's the same way. The number of calories you have to expend to process fiber, even just moving it through your GI tract, is probably higher than the calories it generates in fermentation, which is just one more reason why fiber should have 0 calories. And honestly, I'm cheating if you go to proteinpercent.com, my website that visualizes protein percent, or satietypercalorie.com, I'm literally giving fiber 0 calories. So if what I have on there doesn't quite match up to a packaging label you're looking at, that's the reason. I'm giving fiber appropriately, in my opinion, no calories.
Makes sense. Those are great tools. I can't wait to check those out myself. I haven't seen that yet, but we'll certainly link that up as well in the show notes. So that makes a lot of sense. So what would be what's the lesson there? Just eat as much fiber as you can, basically. Is that the lesson there, or?
Well, so all of these factors are on a U-shaped curve.
Got it.
Where if you just, and people are like, oh, I'm going to get the high score. I'm going to win. I'm going to eat, if you take protein to the absurd level and just try to eat 100% whey powder or egg whites, it's going to be an epic fail. So It's on a U-shaped curve where you want to be higher than you were before, but you're not trying to be 100%. Fiber is severely on a U-shaped curve. So you want to be higher than you were before, in a comfortable, sustainable way. But if you try to eat, 100 grams of fiber a day, your GI tract is going to literally hate you. It's not going to be pretty. So it's definitely a U-shaped curve, and there's such a thing as too much on all of these. You can eat a diet where the energy density is too low and you're starving out of your mind. If you tried to just live off of broccoli, you'd literally have to eat, 16 pounds of food a day, and you'd probably die of a bowel obstruction or something. So you can't go absurdly high on any of these. You can't go 100% protein and eat egg whites. You can't go zero energy density and just live off of watercress. It's not going to work. You can't do the fiber absurd thing where I'm just going to eat, a huge amount. So you're just trying to be higher than you were before. And you want to do progressive overload, just like with adding weight to the bar, it's like, okay, I'm not just going to throw 500 pounds on this newbie's bench press. They're going to start with a bar, and then I'm just going to micro load and stick some, 5-pound plates on there every couple of weeks. It's the same way with all of these. It's like, okay, I realize my protein percent is 15%. I'm going to just try to get to 20. I'm not going to be ridiculous. Or I'm eating 15 grams of fiber a day. I'm going to try to eat, 20 or 30. So you're just trying to go up a little over what you were previously. And I can't emphasize that enough, because anyone who just goes to the absurd level is going to fail. And that honestly is how we got to zero carb diets and keto and carnivore. And it's like, if less is better, then zero is the best. And that's actually not true for any of these parameters at all.
Yeah. It's funny, because I always think the diet camps really don't know what to do with you, do they? Because you kind of sit in the middle of all of them at this point.
Yeah, and I realize I'm much happier that way. I'm basically agnostic, and I'm trying not to be in any of these camps, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, look, as soon as I see someone with a social media profile that says they're plant-based or carnivore, I immediately disregard everything they say, because it's like, well, you've got a huge bias. And you're always going to look for things that support that. So it's just not that intellectually honest and that valuable. So that's why I really like what you do. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Because just like me, you've seen people excel in all camps. So what's going on there, right? Just on this point about fiber, just to finish this point with a clear metric, what is the total grams or percentage that people should be aiming for then? Just to give them a guide on that, because you said about protein 20%, and maybe when people are more advanced, 25, 30%, I think is what you said before. So what does that look like with regard to fiber? How do we measure that? What we should be aiming for? Yeah.
All right. So typically I'm suggesting maybe 15 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories. So if you're eating 2,000 calories, you might want to eat 30 grams of fiber. And I think that would be a really good target. That's the recommended grams of fiber per 2,000 for American male is 28 grams, I think. So so basically you're trying to just double the fiber that the average American eats, and that would end up being about 30 calories a day for your average, full size adult.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay, so what's the fourth thing that you think of? What would be the fourth point to educate our client about when it comes to nutrition after fiber?
Oh, right. Okay. So we got protein first. We got energy density second.
Yeah.
We got fiber third. The fourth one is...
We'll do five just to manage your expectation.
The fourth one is the hedonic addictive nature of high energy density carbs and fats together. So people have to understand that when you eat a food that is high carb, high fat, and high energy density together, that's extraordinarily addictive. It lights up your brain. It's literally almost a drug-like effect on your brain. It's so rewarding. Our whole evolution it was easy to get protein throughout evolution. Like if just imagine I sent you back in time and you're in the Paleolithic and you've got a loincloth and a spear and it's winter time and you're just trying to eat something. Everything around you, we eat by just eating living organisms. All the living organisms around you are going to have tons of protein and fiber, but almost no carbs and fats. All your animals are going to be starving to death, so they're all skinny and they're trying to get enough energy calories to be alive. All your plants are just like leaves and bark and stems and roots, and it's just like protein and fiber everywhere, right? All the animals are starving and super skinny. All the plants have shrunk down, and it's just like fiber and protein. So you got all the protein and honestly minerals and micronutrients and fiber you could ever want, but you're looking for energy. So you're looking for like honey and brains and bone marrow. And you're just like, that's why we invented all these ways to get more carbs and fats, more energy, right? You're just, if you ever found any fruit or honey or really fat animal, you would just gorge yourself and basically just binge eat the hell out of that. And so we basically have this natural inclination to seek out carbs and fats because that's what we were short on most of our evolution, and to binge eat when we found these, and also to get the most carbon fat calories we could for expending the least amount of energy, because if you spend 2,000 calories, tracking down a antelope and killing it, and you only get 1,000 calories back, you're going to be dead in a week. You know what I mean? So we're wired to eat the most calories while expending the fewest calories and also getting the highest energy density carbs or fat, or carbs and fats together. So now that you got like Uber Eats and you can get donuts on your phone, you just press one button and donuts just arrive at your door. It's the ultimate and like the least energy expenditure and the most energy return. And this high energy density carb and fat just lights up your brain. All of these super obesogenic foods are lowish protein, like 10% protein, not so low that you just give up on eating, but like 10% protein, 45% carb, 45% fat, kind of in the 40 to 60% each. And that's your pizza and your donuts and your cupcakes and your, all of your super tasty stuff. And so avoiding that is like kind of important. And it's not really like avoiding it completely, unless you feel like you have some sort of, food addiction thing, then you might want to avoid it completely. But for most people, it's like eating that last and eating that after you've already had a lot of high satiety per calorie foods, lots of protein, lots of fiber, lots of micronutrients. And then maybe you're going to eat a donut for dessert or two, but you're trying to not eat the whole box. You know what I mean? So the fourth one is respect for what in the PE diet I call the trifecta, which is these high carb, high fat, high energy density foods that are so addictive and rewarding. And honestly, I think that's half the obesity epidemic, is people just eating these all the time because they're so good.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. That's great. Totally agree. And what would be that? I mean, maybe there's more, and obviously feel free to share more, but what would be the fifth thing that comes to mind? I've got a little list here if you don't remember, but it's, I'm sure you do. But I've got, reducing fat intake, which you've just talked about, reducing, high carb and high fat. So maybe you've kind of covered that. And you've talked about increasing water as well, which is interesting. But what would be number 5 for you on that list?
Yeah, it probably would be hydration. So honestly, like if you just look at protein percent, that already incorporates reducing carbs and fat. So being a little bit low carb and low fat. And if you look at energy density, that's definitely about lowering fat grams and, carbs as well. And so all of these are kind of incorporating these other elements. I could list a dozen different elements that are like, less alcohol, less carbs, less fat, less processing and refinement. But I think just the big concepts of protein percent and energy density already incorporate most of those. So the next one for me would probably be hydration, because so many people like can't tell if they're hungry versus thirsty. And I'm one of those people. We have some amazing studies where if you drink, 2 8-ounce glasses of water before each meal, you're going to eat 300 calories less in the day and still have the same satiety score at the end of the day. So, that's very powerful. That's That's it's a hack, but it works really, really well. So you want to drink your body weight in ounces, maybe you want to aim for a gallon a day. And you drink, and this is something that really is evidence-based. You drink water, first thing in the morning, you drink water before your meals. And for me, I don't care if people drink any kind of non-caloric beverage. So I'm fine with diet soda or whatever artificial sweeteners you want. I think they're harmless in a non-caloric setting. So drink whatever you want, but water's good. You know what I mean?
What about coffee and tea and all that kind of thing?
I think they're fine. Like we literally know that the caffeine is actually helpful for satiety per calorie. It literally allows people to eat fewer calories. So caffeine's awesome. Coffee is awesome. Tea is awesome. They look better than water on a all-cause mortality big picture spectrum. So you literally, like coffee, people who drink coffee have like a 40% lower risk for type 2 diabetes and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and all of this stuff. And it's because the caffeine literally improves satiety per calorie and literally improves calorie burning. So you're basically going to eat less and burn more simultaneously when you're consuming coffee and tea. So I love it. As long as you're not putting any calories in it, coffee's awesome. Right. Tea is awesome. Diet soda is awesome. We have studies showing diet soda is literally better than water in RCTs on obese people trying to lose weight because it's satisfying some sort of sweet taste humans have with no calories at all, which is a massive win. So I'm like, drink whatever you want, but stay well hydrated. And there's a reason why all these ripped and jacked people on Instagram, you just see them with this water bottle 24 hours a day. They're just carrying it around with them everywhere, right? These people are definitely well hydrated. So I do think that is important. It's not the biggest rock in the jar, but it's definitely in there.
Wow. I did not know that. That's really, a lot of that is news to me. Yeah, so I guess it's very convenient because that really justifies your 10 cups of coffee a day, right, Ted?
Absolutely. That's what all this is about. It's just justifying what I'm doing.
Yeah. And how much coffee do you drink these days, just out of interest?
Oh, I probably drink about 40 ounces of coffee a day, which is a lot.
How many cups would that be? So
I don't know. I mean, technically a cup is like 6 ounces. A real cup is 8 ounces, but a cup of coffee is 6 ounces for some weird creative coffee math. Okay. So I guess it's like six cups a day.
6.6. That's a lot.
Yeah. So something like that. That's a lot. That's probably too much. Don't do what I'm doing on the coffee. I'm a rapid metabolizer of caffeine, so I have to drink more, but not everyone can get away with that. So I typically recommend, 2 cups of coffee a day is awesome. That's really good.
Yeah, because there's downsides to drinking too much coffee, right? In terms of obviously sleep, if you drank too late in the day, maybe the jitters, anxiety, those kinds of things. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, well, the LD50, the lethal dose for 50% of the population for coffee is 70 cups a day. So you definitely wouldn't want to drink 70 cups a day.
70. Wow.
Yeah, you should probably die. Yeah. But yeah, too much coffee is bad. Just from a stimulant point of view, blood pressure and heart rate and risk for arrhythmias and all sorts of like possible downsides. So you don't want to go crazy with caffeine.
But the amount you were saying that the safe dosage you were talking about just now is indicative of beneficial based on its impact on satiety. That's the mechanism that's driving those risk reductions you just mentioned, right?
I think it's actually a combination of raising the sympathetic tone, which increases fat mobilization and calorie burning. Plus satiety per calorie. So it's probably a combination of like you're basically burning more calories because it's a stimulant and also eating less because partly because it's a stimulant, but also partly because it does improve satiety.
So is it outrageous for me to say that some of these caffeine pills I think have been sold by a lot of these celebrities over the years, there's maybe a tiny bit of truth to their beneficial fat loss effect, although it's much smaller than the rocks we talked about at the start of this?
Absolutely. There are a couple substances that are actually evidence-based for fat loss. And one of them is caffeine, and one of them is green tea extract, and one of them is capsaicin or hot pepper stuff. So
Don't they try and put that all in a pill together?
You can literally buy pills for all of those, and they are microscopically beneficial. And it's literally beneficial to eat spicy food, drink green tea, drink coffee. These are all very, very lightly beneficial. I would say this is more of like a 1% thing, but absolutely, directionally, all of those are helpful for fat loss.
Got it. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. So just to summarize that quickly, so these would be our 5 teaching points for clients around diet and fat loss, which could be communicated in a session. You could really expand or increase or decrease the amount of information you give depending on the medium, right? So number 1, we got protein awareness, and I'm just going to summarize these. So getting people to increase their protein intake first and foremost. Then we're looking at energy density, which means you're aiming for, was it 1 gram of food weight per, 2 calories per 1 gram of food weight as a rough guide, looking at trying to reduce your energy density per calorie basically across your diet. The third thing is, so correct me if I'm getting any of these wrong, Ted. The third thing is fiber. And you're aiming for, again, a 1 gram of fiber per calorie. Is that correct? No?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I would say, 15 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories.
Sorry, I got that totally wrong. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. 15 grams per 1,000. Okay, on average. And then number 4 is avoiding the trifecta, the high carb, high fat, high energy density foods, because they're very hedonic and addictive and obviously cause rapid weight gain and no satiety. And then number 5 would be just increasing hydration, which tends to lead to greater satiety and lower caloric intake overall, right? So those are the big 5. To bring it back to a high intensity training, well-known workout model, big 5, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sound good? Anything I'm missing there? Anything else you think is really important? Maybe
that sounds good.
To that?
I would say on the fiber side, I kind of like to look at the ratio, because 15 grams per 1,000 calories, that doesn't mean anything to anyone, including me. So
yeah, I must say that confused me a little bit. Yeah.
I like to look at the ratio of fiber carbs to non-fiber carbs and try to get that up to like maybe a 1 to 5. So like if you're looking at the label and it's 5 grams of carbohydrate, you want 1 gram of fiber, you know what I mean? Or if it's 10 grams of carbs, 2 grams of fiber, you're looking for a 5 to 1 or higher fiber to non-fiber ratio. And so like your white bread has, 50 grams of carbs and 1 gram of fiber. But your low carb tortilla wrap thing has, 25 grams of carbs and 5 grams of fiber. So that's like a 5 to 1, 5 grams of carbs to 1 gram of fiber kind of ratio. So I think that's really handy is to look at the carb to fiber ratio when it comes to your fiber containing foods, or, mostly carbohydrate usually. So I think that's more valuable to people than just trying to. So instead of being like, well, try to eat 30 grams at the end of the day, people are like, well, how do I do that? And I'm like, well, try to eat 15 grams per 1,000 calories. And people are like, what does that even mean? I'm like, oh, well, just look at the label of everything you're buying and see if it's 5 grams of carb to 1 gram fiber, or 1 gram fiber to 5 grams of carbs. So like your low carb bread is, like we have, this low carb bread in my pantry right now. That's, it's, 24 grams of carbs and 6 grams of fiber. So that's like a 4 to 1 carb to fiber ratio, which is really good. So I think that's more practical for most people. It's to just look at each individual food that they're eating that has carbs and fiber in it and try to get this ratio higher than usual.
Awesome. That's much easier for me to understand. 1 to 5, aiming for 1 to 5 ratio. I love that. Ted, just before we wrap up, I'd love to hear, obviously we've talked about an overview of what we're looking to achieve in terms of a guide, but in terms of how that manifests itself on a plate, I think the best example would be your own diet, right? Because you follow this pretty closely. So just give me a day of eating. What does it look like now for you currently?
Gotcha. Yeah. So I'm typically doing like a light intermittent fasting, just a 16-8. So I'm eating, 2 or 3 meals. an 8-hour window, and I am eating that a little bit later in the day. So it's like noon to 8 p.m. type thing. Mm-hmm. And so honestly, I am cheating because on Sundays I do meal prep and I just make a whole bunch of food for the week. And I have these different, meals that I pull out. I'll for example, I might make a meatloaf, but use ground turkey just because the protein percent's higher. And, or I might make a sheet pan meal with, potatoes and chicken breast. And this is going to have, a higher protein percent. It's more carb heavy, than fat, but it's, basically, the same protein percentage either way. So, on Sundays, I bulk prep a lot of meals, and the proteins I'm using are typically ground turkey, ground chicken, chicken breast, skinless chicken thighs, and I'm making some sort of meal with vegetables and meat, basically. And I usually take that to work as like my first meal of the day, breakfast or lunch. And so that's what I might eat for, breakfast or lunch, one of those meals. And then at home, I'm usually cooking a piece of meat and some sort of vegetables. So I'm grilling a lot. I'm making, fish, chicken breast, sirloin. It's basically lean-ish cuts of beef or poultry or fish. And then I'm combining that with some sort of vegetable. I will eat carbier vegetables with very little added fat. So I might have like boiled potatoes or something like that without a lot of fat on it. Or I might have lower carb vegetable with more fat on it, like a salad with dressing or asparagus that might have some olive oil or something on it. But it's basically either a little higher fat and lower carb, or a little higher carb and lower fat. The centerpiece always being some sort of lean meat for protein. Number one snack for me is definitely Greek yogurt, a low carb and a low fat Greek yogurt. I eat a lot of that. I eat about
just by itself,
100 of that a day. Say again.
Just by itself, just plain, like nothing in it, nothing on it.
Oh, no, I'm usually just getting an artificially flavored one because I'm not afraid of artificial sweeteners. So I just get whatever flavored, light and fit Greek yogurt or whatever that's,
So it could be like strawberry or banana or anything like that. Interesting. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Typically, just any flavor, really. I'm mostly just looking at the macros, and I'm aiming for, high protein with low overall calories. And that's just a major snack for me. I do use some whey powder, but not a lot. It's mostly Greek yogurt. Other things that I eat a lot. For snacks, I eat a lot of sardines. I eat a lot of hard-boiled eggs. I eat a lot of low-fat cheese sticks and that kind of thing. It's basically low-fat dairy, fish and seafood, lean meat, lean beef, lean poultry, vegetables. Main carb sources, I'm trying to get carbs that are very high in fiber. So I eat a lot of potatoes and apples and carrots, and I eat a lot of berries, and I eat a lot of, I do eat some oatmeal as well. I do eat some air popped popcorn. I'm eating, carbs that have a high fiber to carb ratio, fairly low energy density, and I'm usually not adding a lot of fat to those. So when I'm eating fattier things, I try not to add as much carbs. When I'm eating carbier things, I try not to add as much fat. But basically, it's always pick lean protein, add in either higher on the fat and lower on the carb side, or higher on the carb side, lower on the fat side, and just try to keep the fiber high when I am eating carbohydrates. And that's so it's like step one: target protein, pick your protein, build your meal around it. Step two is pick your carbs and fats, but you're trying to get low energy density carbs and fats, and you're trying to eat more fiber if you're on the carb side, and eat less carbs if you're on the fat side. And then step three is basically managing the donuts, right? The pastries, the desserts. Like I usually eat those last. I usually eat those at the end of the day and at the end of a meal when I'm already.
You do occasionally eat them, Ted?
Oh yeah, I did. My diet is at least 10 or 20% just abject garbage, just donuts and pizza and pure.
That makes
junk.
You feel much better. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm absolutely eating these types of foods daily. I'm just very, very cautious with them. I'm eating them typically a dessert style. So like at the end of a meal, and And near the end of the day, usually when I've already hit, plenty of high satiety calorie foods, and that's where I fit those in. But I think there's definitely room for that if you have good body composition and you're exercising and all that. But yeah, that's kind of how it looks like for me.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And you're strength training daily, roughly, or 4 or 5 times a week, something like that?
Tons daily. I mean, I like really high frequency. My volumes are very low. So I'm usually doing at least a set of everything daily. And a lot of high intensity people are like, oh, that's way too often. I'm like, well, just pretend I do 7 sets once a week with a 24-hour rest period between sets.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love what you do, and you're doing a lot of exercise, right? You still do like the extreme frisbee and tons of walking the dog and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. It's it's basically step counts pretty high. It's 10 to 15,000 a day, and definitely trying to do some cardio. Ultimate frisbee a couple times a week, or just jogging or running. I like to run hills. I'll run up a hill and then walk down, and just turn that into a little natural interval type thing when I'm walking. So yeah, I'm doing all of that stuff.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So just want to be respectful of your time. So we'll start to wrap up there. Thank you so much, Ted. This is, as always, just awesome, and given me and my audience some great takeaways in terms of how we can better educate clients on how diets can affect fat loss. So I think, what you've done here is really going to compound in terms of value, because every studio owner who finds this useful and decides to implement it is probably going to have way more success with their clients, dialing in their diets and getting better results, which is great. And where can people find out more about you? So find out about the PE diet, and obviously you've got this new book coming, which you don't want to give a time scale on yet because it's self-published. And but do you want to talk about a little bit about that, and then where people can find the PE diet book as well?
Oh, sure, right, yeah. So I wrote this book called The PE Diet, and you can find that pretty much anywhere books are sold online, or go to thepediet.com or tednaiman.com and find links to either a PDF copy you can get online, or a physically printed copy, which is unfortunately expensive because it's a really big book. But anyway, you can also find me on social media at Ted Naiman, pretty much all over. On Twitter is where I'm most active, but Instagram and all the socials. And I am working on a new book called Satiety per Calorie. And you can just kind of get a snapshot of what the visual looks like at satietypercalorie.com. And it's really just an agnostic way of looking at the different factors that anyone could layer over their existing diet of any pattern to basically automatically eat fewer calories by raising, protein and fiber and lowering energy density and reducing these hedonic foods. And it's pretty much just like a nice little heuristic that you could just layer on top of any diet camp. So whether you're paleo or vegan or keto or carnivore or whatever, you can still use these same principles right on top of what you've got going on. But personally, I'm trying to transcend all the diet camps and be agnostic and just be way up here above all of them with a strategy you could layer on top of all of these. And yeah, I don't know when this book will come out, probably like
50 years.
Not before the end of the year. I have no deadline.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair play to you. Thank you so much. And this has been so valuable. And for everyone listening, to find the blog post for this episode, please go to highintensitybusiness.com, search for episode 381. And until next time, thank you very much for listening. This episode is brought to you by Strength Portal. You need a single software platform that enables your trainers to deliver consistent, high-quality workouts, track client progress, and scale your business. The problem is you're still using pen and paper or basic spreadsheets to run your business, which leads to poor client experiences, inaccurate tracking, and prevents you from growing your business, making you feel frustrated. Strength Portal understand your challenge and have worked closely with the HIIT industry to create a software platform to manage and scale your niche business. You can integrate with MindBody, manage a standardized exercise and workout library for your team, track workouts effectively, and produce client reports at the click of a button. Strength Portal is used by multiple businesses in the high-intensity strength training community, namely Discover Strength, Smart Strength Austin, Medix Precision Fitness, and more. Starting with Strength Portal is super simple. Number 1, sign up for the best package for your business. Number 2, let Strength Portal take the load off and help onboard your business onto the platform. And number 3, start delivering consistent workout experiences and scale your business to the next level. To help support the podcast, please go to strengthportal.com/high intensity business and sign up now, so you can stop feeling frustrated about your business and start to scale your business to its true potential. Go to strengthportal.com/high intensity business.